Creation, Genesis as Foundation, Part 2. We are following a study on how to interpret Scripture this quarter. And after establishing the basic principles, last week we started looking at some of the fundamental beliefs and understandings that are established at the beginning. These understandings shape everything else that follows and influences how we read the texts. So this week we continue what we started last week with Creation, Genesis as Foundation, Part 2. Even though some of the first great minds of modern science were inspired by Scripture, after the French Revolution things started shifting more into an atheistic worldview. Some of the critiques against the Bible are that it borrowed certain pagan stories to form a worldview of cosmology that doesn't stand with science. For example, some are reading certain passages in the book of Revelation mentioning the four corners of the earth and claim that the Bible teaches about a flat earth. It's important to discern when the Bible uses a symbolic language and when it uses a literal language. It can be very tricky, but if we apply the principles that we discussed this quarter, things will fall into place. The lesson gives an example with Jesus saying, "For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, theft, false witness, blaspheming." He's not lecturing on human physiology here or talking about a literal human heart. The same way, the four corners of the earth are a metaphor for the four directions of the earth: east, west, north, and south. Furthermore, in the book of Job, we have verses where he talks about the earth as circle or sphere that hangs on nothing. This is an amazing understanding that science didn't come up to until several thousand years later. There are some claims that the story of creation, for example, and the flood were borrowed from pagan beliefs. And there are some very interesting things that archaeologists have found about some ancient civilizations, but when you look closely, even though they refer to similar accounts, the perspective is very different. A pagan description of creation, for example, refers to gods who create man so that he can work and they can rest. A minor god gets killed and his blood gets mixed with clay to form 7 males and females. The biblical account of creation is very different. God creates man so that man can rule over the world and take care of it. They commune together, they rest together. There is no violence in the biblical creation. And the way Adam is created is very intimate, with God breathing life into him and then forming the woman to be part of him. These are very big differences, and these differences influence how we see life. The Bible is very careful to separate from pagan views. When referring to the sun and the moon that are tightly referred to pagan gods, it carefully chooses a language to avoid such references, like a greater light and smaller light. The Bible is also very peculiar to depict time. The chronologies are amazingly precise on how they describe generations, with such details that it's impossible to skip a generation or more. This tells us a lot about human history and the framework of our world. Last but not least, the lesson takes us into a journey of quotes on how Jesus and the New Testament writers refer to our origins. And the conclusion is that they refer to Genesis chapter 1 to 11 as reliable history. How we understand human origin determines our worldview and how we understand God's message to us. So, spend some time digging into the creation account. Next week, we are moving on to the Bible as history.